In this video, we'll look at a Shaolin monk named Shi Heng Yi and how his facial features point to wood luck and his trustworthy nature. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. Always happy to have you here for another face reading. Today, we've got Shi Heng Yi. So before we jump into his face and breaking down the elemental things that I'm seeing, if you're a first-time viewer, please go up here and watch the crash course face reading video. It's only 5 minutes, very important in terms of how you frame and understand face reading, what it is and what it isn't. And if you are enjoying my content, liking it and finding value, please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and please share my stuff with other people. That's how this channel grows, and I need your help. And if you can provide that, much appreciated, but only if you're getting value from this. So that being said, Shi Heng Yi, he is a Shaolin Gong Fu master. He runs something, I believe it's called the Shaolin Temple Europe. So in Europe, he has a center of sorts where he teaches the Shaolin Gong Fu methodologies, as well as Buddhist principles and spiritual principles, more or less, on how to live life. The reason I'm face reading him, for one, as a person who is really passionate about martial arts and whatnot, his Gong Fu is fantastic. It's really good. He's sharp as all hell. So if you watch him move, if you see any of his videos, his technique is superb. So I have the utmost admiration for him at that level. But from a face reading perspective, he is a case study in wood energy. So a couple different layers we'll look at this. For one, the wood element definitely is dominant in his elemental breakdown in terms of how energy comes out of the face. So he's got direct peach luck, what they also call wood luck. He definitely has some strong wood features, but the elemental rhythm that comes out of his face is the wood, and that's how it ties to that direct peach luck. So we want to think, when we're looking at someone's face, whenever we feel the shen or the spirit coming from someone's face, that's all reading the fire element technically. But that fire element expression can take on a few different shapes. It's sort of like the spirit or the consciousness or the soul of a person is under this larger umbrella of the fire element and how the shen or the spirit expresses. But when we talk about the peach lucks, these are sort of like subdivisions underneath that umbrella. So that being said, he's dominant in wood. He's also got some pretty good metal. He's got some big open spaces, but I want to talk about this, and I want you to see how he looks, and it's powerful when you see how he operates, and you see how his energy comes from the face. It's something that I really enjoy watching. And I've said before in my other videos, I really like reading people with dominant wood energy. I seem to vibe with people who have dominant wood energy. I have training in martial arts. That's a lot of wood energy. I have some wood energy in me, but again, let's talk about it. So the first and foremost element here that I want to talk about is wood. And specifically, when you look at his face, if you look at some of these pictures, there is a stoicism and directness that comes out of the face. So he does smile, but his smile in many of his pictures is sort of a muted, soft, smiled, contained smile. It's not one that's usually just brimming with a ton of fire energy. However, when he does smile, it's very warm and it's very genuine, but it's still sort of encapsulated in this wood energy. The thing we want to remember about the wood element when we're talking about face reading or breaking down someone's personality structure is that wood energy has to do with directness. It has to do with martial prowess. It has to do with being persuasive in a very bold and direct way. It's about the battering ram. Okay, if you think of like a wood log, as a battering ram that's going into a castle or breaking something down, you want to think of it like that. So it's kind of like wood energy has this very real, long-lasting driving power. It's also the infrastructure for homes and for shelter, right? It creates the substrata for things to be built upon. So he's got a lot of this. There's that stoicism, that strong wood energy coming out of his face. And again, in terms of lifestyle alignment, in terms of nourishing life, how he's living and what his face carries, Shaolin martial arts requires tremendous control of the ligaments and the tendons. You have to start Shaolin at a pretty early age to get your ligaments to be able to do what they're going to do as you age, to keep them pliable and loose. And he holds true to this. He's incredibly flexible. His speed is very, very fast. He's got quick, fast, snappy movements. But again, we see some strong wood in his face and how the energy comes out of his face. And he's also expressing that into his lifestyle rhythms. And that's where face reading comes into play. So when people get a face reading from me, these are the elements that we talk about. Maybe you don't have as much wood as him, and maybe you're not designed to be a Shaolin monk. But if you are dominant in water, earth, fire, metal, whatever it is, when you're dominant in that, your lifestyle rhythms have to align with that. And that's where I come in. That's sort of where my lifestyle guidance comes in. We use your face as a codex or a primer and then build out these things around it. So for him, he's living the way he should be. There's definitely some good energy in terms of the wood element energy that's coming out of his face and what he's actually doing. So there's a quick clip I want to play here, and I want you to just take a gander at this, because when you watch him speak, you're going to see that direct peach luck, that wood luck energy coming right out of his face. And again, it's characterized by boldness, directness, and also it's persuasive and kind of alluring. There's something about the directness that you want to be around, that you want to listen to, that you want to pay attention to, and you also trust it usually. You know, if peach lucks are firing on all of their cylinders, regardless of what it is, it should feel trustworthy. But with wood luck in particular, oftentimes when people give that direct message, there's a bit more trust embedded in that wood element, I would say more so than the other ones, because that boldness and directness takes a certain amount of courage, and most of us trust courage. So that being said, let's go ahead and put this video on. We'll check it out.
Take decisions while you're emotional. It's not so important if you are able to define what is anger. The main thing to remember is, don't ever take any decision where you feel it's been taken from a feeling out of anger. Anger is one that has very destructive consequences afterwards, because you could burn the wood that you have saved for many, many winters just in one night. This is what this anger, in a way, is doing.
I really like the analogy he uses there about burning up your wood, talking about anger. And it's one of those emotions where you can burn all that wood that you've been storing for many winters, essentially, in a single night. That's the nature of anger. You can burn bridges with people. It's also interesting. I don't think it's by happenstance. I'm guessing, given his background studying of Chinese culture and martial arts and whatnot, he's using a direct 5-element reference there. So the wood energy regulates the liver and anger specifically. That's what the wood element does. Regulates anger, processes anger and frustration. And when the liver gets out of sorts, it can turn into pathological conditions called liver fire blazing. This is where we see huge outbursts of anger and whatnot. It's sort of like dry, brittle wood that is suddenly combusted. So again, I love that analogy. It's a great way to think about anger. But if you see that directness that's coming out of his face, there's something almost fatherly and direct, but also protective. It's like, he really wants you to do well, but he's saying it with a very firm but refined edge. And this is sort of, I think, the perfect expression of wood energy. This is a very balanced wood element expression. You can see the wood element get really unwieldy with martial artists sometimes, where they become overly aggressive. The wood becomes too snappy, and they do have too much of a temper. And he really seems to have tempered this very, very well. So these are kind of the key elements I've seen. Now, when we look at some of the other big structures of his face, he does have some pretty sizable metal. So he's got big, open, broad features, right? There's these big open spaces with not a lot of interruption. So that's interesting, because technically, as I've said before, that's a little bit of a conflict, a lot of wood energy and a lot of metal, but he seems to be pulling it off. His life force seems very well expressed. And if you look at his face, that again, it's that groundedness in the face. When the Shen is beaming from someone's face and it's coming out and it's clear to see and it's not hard to read, I would argue the vast majority of you, if you were talking to him in person or just from watching that video and looking at these pictures, the vast majority of people would likely trust this man. And that has to do with that boldness and directness, again, because it takes a certain amount of courage to be that way. And typically with courage, many of us will trust. So I think he captures this really well. But if we look at his public persona, his natural face, and his inner persona, there's some differences, right? I tried to find a picture without shadows. It was pretty difficult. But if you look at his faces across the board here, they're all pretty firm. They're all pretty direct. They all have some liver lines, right? These furrowed brows right in the middle. There is a directness to this man. So I would say, while he's got a good edge of tempered wood actively, running in his life, there's also an inherent firmness with it. And that is very wood. That's sort of the signature of wood, is firmness. There's something very direct, boundary oriented, and blunt about it. And he definitely carries this. But if you have not checked him out, I would strongly encourage you all to give him a follow. Find him on Instagram, Shi Heng Yi, and you can look up his platform. I teach Qigong weekly. If any of you ever want to take a Qigong class on Thursday mornings, hit me up. I'm happy to come to a class, but he also offers Qigong programs. So I like this about it because for as much wood energy as he has, he also studies the soft fluid arts, which is what nourishes wood and keeps wood moist and supple. So if you think of it from an elemental perspective, he's doing something very smart. Wood energy has a tendency to become dry, brittle, and flare up just like a fire. But if you're doing soft, refined yin exercises like Qigong breathing and Buddhist philosophy and these things that are very watery, it hydrates the wood, keeps the person tempered, and this is where the 5 elemental cycle comes really into play in terms of life nourishment and why face reading is so important. All right, y'all. Thanks for your time as always. Take care.